All right, so welcome to the February meeting of the Delta Independent Science Board. I call the meeting to order. There's some housekeeping, and I'll hand over for that to Jonathan.
Thank you, Inge. So staff are here at the California Natural Resources Building, and in the event of evacuation at the resources building, everyone should remain calm. Take your belongings and proceed to the nearest exit out the building. So staff will gather at the evacuation point of 1615 9th Street, and the public is welcome to join us there. And note that there should be no food or beverages allowed in the meeting room where we're at here. That's it.
Thank you, Jonathan. And here is an overview of the public comment process. We will take written questions and comments from the public throughout the meeting. Please follow instructions on your screen and on the meeting notice. So next is our roll call of members to establish quorum. So I'll call everyone. Peter.
Good morning, everyone, and no new declarations.
Thank you. Kathleen.
Good morning. No new declarations.
Thank you. Tanya.
Good morning. Tanya Heigela, no new declarations.
Good morning. And Steve.
Hi, everybody. Steve Limley. No new declarations.
Diane.
Diane McKnight, no new declarations.
Anna.
Anna Mikulak, no new declarations. And I just want to note I'm in a location with poor Wi-Fi today, so I'll be keeping my video off.
Thank you. Obi. Is Obi?
Yeah, I'm here. Jayanta Besekar, no new declarations.
Thanks. And do we have Kenny?
Hi, Kenny Rose, no new declarations.
All right. Lisa?
Hello, Lisa Wanger, no new declarations.
And I'm Inge Wener. I have no new declarations. Thanks, everyone. For an overview of the agenda, we are here today to discuss the draft science plan and our review of it. And we will also receive updates from the Delta Stewardship Council and the Delta Science Program. Welcome, Council Chair Julie Lee and Delta Lead Scientist Lisamarie Windham-Myers. Are there public comments?
There are none.
Thank you, Edmund. All right, agenda item 2 is my report, the Delta ISB Chair's report and business matters. We have a few staffing changes. So Jonathan Huang's California Sea Grant State Fellowship concludes on March 9th. Although his fellowship concludes, he plans to attend the IEP workshop on March 16th to 18th to give a presentation on his pesticide project that is part of the contaminants monitoring review. Jonathan has been leading an effort to synthesize information on pesticide use and toxicity and looking in the Delta and looking at which pesticides are monitored by current programs to determine how widespread the use of highly toxic pesticides is in the Delta and whether current monitoring reflects patterns of use and toxicity. So he also plans to attend the Delta ISB's in-person meeting in March after his fellowship concludes to reflect on what he learned from his fellowship. A big thank you to Jonathan for committing these efforts after his fellowship concludes. And of course, a big thank you to Jonathan in general. But we will get an opportunity for that and our reflections at the next meeting. So this week on Monday, Alyssa Burns started as the new California Sea Grant State Fellow supporting the Delta ISB. Welcome, Alyssa. I will turn it over to you now to briefly introduce yourself.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Alyssa Burns, and I'm excited to work with the Independent Science Board as the 2026 California Sea Grant State Fellow. I recently wrapped up my PhD at UC Davis in the Agricultural and Environmental Chemistry graduate group, where I studied carbon cycling in large river deltas and estuaries. While I did collaborate on projects in the Sacramento-San Joaquin River Delta, specifically investigating the role of wetland detritus in supporting food webs, most of my research centered around biogeochemical cycling in the Yukon River Delta in Alaska. Through tribal engagement and close community partnerships, this research established a baseline for the transport and transformation of organic carbon in this rapidly warming Arctic system across unprecedented temporal and spatial scales. I investigated variability in organic carbon composition and associated source contributions across distinct hydrologic conditions by employing environmental biomarkers, specifically lignin phenols. Additionally, these terrestrial tracers were used to improve general understanding of the chemical and physical processing of organic carbon across expansive land-ocean continuums, where long residence times can promote alteration of materials before reaching marine environments. Along with these research efforts, I served on the board of directors for the Northern California chapter of the Society of Environmental Toxicology and Chemistry, also known as NorCal CTAC, and supported networking and collaboration of students and professionals across the Northern California region. After years of studying topics related to climate change and water quality, I'm excited to use this scientific knowledge to support the health and value of the Delta ecosystem through my fellowship period, and I look forward to meeting and talking with all of you directly. But for now, I'll turn it back over to Inge.
Thanks very much, Alyssa. Sounds like you'll fit right in terms of your expertise. So we will hear more from her at the next meeting, of course. And in addition to Alyssa, a postdoctoral scholar will start on April 1st. We will make an announcement once the council approves the candidate, which requires also an amendment to the contract with California Sea Grant. So as soon as we have all that lined up, we will let you know more. Right. Next, I will update on ongoing Delta ISB activities. So first, the decision-making under deep uncertainty. I'll just give some background for those who haven't been here before. The Delta ISB conducted a review on the scientific tools and concepts that can increase the capacity to anticipate and adapt to growing uncertainty of future conditions in the Bay-Delta system, which is called DMDU. The review was released at the end of 2024. Second product, a manuscript based on the inventory and analysis of scenario planning led by Dr. Shoko Shinbrook, was submitted to San Francisco Estuary and Watershed Sciences for a special issue on post-normal decision-making. Reviewer comments have been addressed, and the manuscript was resubmitted to the journal. So we're awaiting publication. Regarding the ongoing contaminants monitoring review, the Delta ISB is, as you know, is conducting a review to assess current contaminant monitoring programs in the Delta. The first part of the review consists of a series of interviews with experts to gain an understanding of how contaminants are currently monitored, the regulatory landscape driving the monitoring, and the thresholds or triggers prompting management action. We finished the first round of interviews in the fall. Participants then were representatives of Sacramento area sewer district, Delta Regional Monitoring Program, Bay-Delta Regional Monitoring Program, Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, and Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board / Delta Conservancy, because that person just moved to the Delta Conservancy. We are in the process of conducting a second round of interviews with representatives from the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board, State Water Resources Control Board, United States Geological Survey, Austria Consulting, and the Interagency Ecological Program. And it's been going really well. We are getting a lot of good information from our participants, and so I'm really excited about the ongoing process. Number 3, the Emerging Climate Science Symposium. The Delta ISB hosted a hybrid symposium on climate science in September to assess the latest climate science and its implications for the Delta. The review leads are working on the first product of the review, which is a summary of key highlights for a non-technical audience. Sorry, I'm at the end of a cold also. The subsidence review, regarding the subsidence review, the Delta ISB is working to address public comments on its draft review. It's called Science to Inform Management of Subsided Lands in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. And there is still the adaptive monitoring manuscript. Margot Mattson and other staff are working with Dr. Virginia Dale to turn our recommendations from the 2022 review on adaptive monitoring into a prospective piece to be submitted to ecological indicators. They are still addressing comments from former and current board members. So that was all regarding our ongoing reviews. Since the last meeting, we received the following public correspondence from Sierra Club. It was just provided to us just for informational purposes. Sorry. A comment letter revised on the revised draft Sacramento Delta Bay-Delta plan. I'm sorry, the heading is a little confusing. Anyway, it was just for informational purposes and addressed to the State Water Board. Are there public comments?
There are none.
I didn't really have a cough until now, so I apologize. Agenda item 3 is the Delta Stewardship Council Chair and Executive Officer report. Welcome, Julie, and thank you for being here, and I'll hand over to you.
Hi, good morning, Inge. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us this morning. We were excited to hear that you've selected a postdoctoral scholar to begin in April. Along those lines, I wanted to share some other important updates regarding some long-term ISB support staff. The council requested a senior environmental scientist position through the state's budget process, some jargon that we call our Budget Change Proposal, or BCP, which was approved, which is good news. It was included in the governor's budget that was released in January. And just for your information, the budget is subject to change through the May revision and the legislative process. But inclusion in the governor's proposed budget is an encouraging step. The legislature is required to pass a budget by June 15th, so we will have surety at that point. The purpose of the BCP was to secure a more sustainable and long-term approach to supporting the work currently carried out by the contracted ISB postdoctoral position. In addition to the new position authority, the BCP also provides funding to support the Delta ISB's cost of living adjustments, which are per Senate Bill 821 in 2021. Since 2021, the council has been covering the increased costs out of other areas of our science program budget. So that's good news on two fronts. We have some new governor appointments that I wanted to share with you. On February 3rd, Rachel Wigington joined the council as our new special assistant for planning and science, serving as the staff lead for the Delta Plan Interagency Implementation Committee, or what we call DPIC, and she has other duties as well. Rachel comes to us from the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta Conservancy, where she has been a senior environmental scientist since 2021. In that role, Rachel frequently attended your meetings and participated in your reviews. This includes some presentations at your non-native species workshop and helping to advance your recommendations from the 2021 non-native species review through the Delta Invasive Species Symposium and the Delta Interagency Invasive Species Coordination Team as part of her work at the Delta Conservancy. Excuse me. Rachel succeeds Amanda Bowl, who left the council late last year to become the executive director of the Delta Protection Commission. So I'm sure you'll join me in welcoming Rachel, and really enjoy having her at our meetings coming up and as a resource for you as well. The Senate Rules Committee has appointed former California State Senator Susan Eggman to the Delta Stewardship Council effective February 6th of this year. Her first council meeting will be on February 26th, 2026, so just coming up, and that is our two-day hearing that I'll talk a little bit about more in just a minute. Dr. Eggman is from Stockton and has served in several public office roles, including as a state senator serving District 5, which includes San Joaquin County, a portion of Stanislaus County, and the Sacramento County community of Galt from 2020 to 2024. Dr. Eggman is a U.S. Army veteran, having joined out of high school and served 4 years as a medic. After her service, she attended California State University, Stanislaus, where she completed a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in social work. She worked as a mental health provider and medical social worker before completing a PhD at the Portland State University. Dr. Eggman's distinguished public service career and experience representing California's Sacramento San Joaquin Delta brings a valuable perspective to the council. Former California State Senator Ben Hueso was in that position previously, and he was appointed from 2023 to 2026. So we look forward to having Dr. Eggman on, and Tanya, you'll be happy about her social service background, right? Her social science background. As for recent reappointments, I'm happy to let you know that California Assembly Speaker Robert Rivas has been reappointed. Has reappointed board member Maria Moranian to the council effective February 4th, 2026 for a 4-year term. Maria has been with us for many years at the council, and she provides a valuable perspective, so I'm really happy that she has been reappointed. And finally, Governor Newsom reappointed me and board member Ann Patterson to 4-year terms each effective February 11th, 2026. And just to give you a little bit of information about our council and how it's made up and our appointees, we have 7 members. 4 are appointed by the governor and 1 each by the state, Senate, and Assembly. And the 7th is the chair of the Delta Protection Commission. So that's kind of how we're made up. Moving on to our 2025 annual report. Each year, the council develops an annual report to showcase the progress made towards California's co-equal goals for the Delta, which, as we all know, are a reliable water supply for California and a resilient ecosystem, while protecting and enhancing the region's unique values as a place where people live, work, and recreate. The 2025 report is now available online. If you go to deltacouncil.ca.gov/annual-reports, there's a page there with all of our year's reports, and the most current one is up there. It's presented in an interactive story map, which we love and get great feedback on. And it also highlights the Delta ISB's accomplishments. So please take a look at that if you haven't had a chance to already. The Certificate of Consistency from DWR is our next topic. DWR, Department of Water Resources, submitted its Certificate of Consistency with the Delta Plan for the Delta Conveyance Project on October 17th, 2026. You've had a couple of updates from me, I think, on this. Under the Delta Reform Act, anyone asserting that a project is inconsistent with the Delta Plan and as a result of that inconsistency would have a significant adverse impact on one or both of the co-equal goals or a state-sponsored flood program may file an appeal within 30 days. So the deadline for filing an appeal to that certificate of consistency was on November 17th, and we did get 10 appeals filed. And because the appeals have been filed, the council is now required to act in its quasi-adjudicatory role. I like to say quasi-judicial. It's less tongue-twisty than adjudicatory. This means that the council must conduct a hearing on the appeals, which will occur on February 26th and 27th of 2026. So we'll have 2 full days of hearing. I always like to mention that the council doesn't approve or reject covered actions. Rather, we have an appellate authority and oversight over covered actions. The council's appellate review is limited to the record and the issues presented on appeal. So we act as a neutral and we decide if the appellants have merit in their arguments. After the hearing, the council will make specific written findings based on the substantial evidence standard. And because appeals have been filed, the council, which provides staff services to the Delta ISB, is now under ex parte communication restrictions regarding the Delta Conveyance project. This means we can't discuss any aspect of the project with individuals outside the council, including members of the ISB, short of providing logistical information like I've provided to you here. I want to emphasize that the Delta ISB is independent of the council and is not subject to these ex parte restrictions. And finally, I want to introduce our 2025 year-in review performance measures topic. We've invited Martina Kohler of the council staff and her team to present an annual update on the Delta Plan performance measures that observed significant changes. Each of these science-based and peer-reviewed measures tracks a unique aspect of the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta and the Sassoon Marsh, and is important in evaluating progress when implementing the Delta Plan. So I'm going to turn it over now to Martina and her team, and afterwards we can take questions on all the items covered in this report.
Thank you, Julie. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be back to present to you our annual performance measures. Last time we presented was in April last year, so I'm happy to be back with some fresh updates. Next slide, please. So what are the performance measures in the context of the Delta Plan and why we use them? So the Delta Reform Act requires that the Delta Plan includes quantified measurable targets associated with achieving the objectives of the Delta Plan. So to fulfill this requirement, the Delta Plan established performance measures that track environmental and administrative changes taking place due to the policies and recommendations in the Delta Plan, and in relation to time-specific and measurable performance targets. The performance measures were selected based on available monitoring data, relevance to the Delta decisions and management, and in alignment with one or more Delta Plan policies or recommendations. And as Julie mentioned, the Delta Plan performance measures allow the council to integrate science and monitoring into decision-making concerning priorities, funding, inform adaptive management, and track progress toward achieving the co-equal goals over time. Next slide, please. So here's a slide about the development process. The development process was a multi-year effort. This timeline shows the process and key milestones. The yellow box marks the 3 selection criteria we used. The process included technical and scientific reviews, iterative refinements, and public comments. The draft performance measures were also presented to this body. This is circled in red. And the Delta ISB feedback informed the development process. And based on this feedback, science-based performance measures were subjected to external peer reviews. Next slide, please. So this process was replicated again for the ecosystem performance measures under the Delta Plan Ecosystem Chapter Amendment. And now we are in the phase of implementing the performance measures. So next slide, please. So the Council's Performance Management Unit tracks performance measures and reports the findings to the Council annually. This year we featured these listed performance measures because they observed interesting recent changes and updates. So today I will be joined by Scott, Megan, and Hannah to walk you through these annual updates and the implications. Next slide. Quickly about the hydrologic conditions. Climate and precipitation patterns drive environmental conditions and therefore also impact management outcomes. So in 2025, we observe an average precipitation. One interesting thing is that there was kind of higher than usual difference between the northern and southern California in terms of precipitations. So the map shows differences in terms of percentages from average precipitation. So the northern green to blue was higher than average, and then orange red, the south below than average. Next slide. Okay, and next slide. So now scaling back to the Delta. So Delta Plan sets a vision for restoring a healthy ecosystem and establishes a target for restoring 60,000 to 80,000 acres of functional, diverse, and interconnected habitat by 2050. So this would be in addition to roughly 70,000 acres of already existing natural habitat that covers the legal delta in Suisun Marsh. So this table breaks the acreage targets by key habitat types in 10-year increments. So together, if these targets are met, the nature habitat would cover about 15 to 18% of the Delta overall area. In addition, the Delta Plan also sets that the restoration projects should be compatible with adjacent land uses and support the human values and aspects of the Delta as an evolving place. Now I will pass the mic to Hannah. So next slide, and Hannah will talk about some recent progress in restoration and our maps. Hannah?
Yeah, good morning again, Delta ISB members. Yeah, like Martina said, in addition to talking about the restoration targets we also wanted to share a bit about the current state of restoration in the Delta. So the analysis that we do here is taken from performance measure 4.15, restoring land water connection. And the data set that we're primarily using was developed by Dylan Chappell and Margot Mattinson and that team as a part of Restoring the Heart of a Healthy Estuary publication that was released late last year. I know that this restoration paper was presented to the board somewhat recently, so I don't want to be redundant, but I do want to show what our unit is doing with this data and share a bit about overall restoration trends. So to the right is an acreage map that we feature on our performance measure website under that restored land water connection performance measure I mentioned earlier. It shows the status of a project, of a restoration project in terms of whether it's completed, in progress, or in planning status. And it also shows the primary habitat type that is being restored. So we focus on land water habitats for this map. So tidal and non-tidal wetlands, floodplain and riparian habitat types. This performance measure has been historically pretty difficult to get data for, and the data set that was provided from the publication that I mentioned earlier has been very helpful for getting this performance measure up to speed. However, I do want to acknowledge that there still exists a challenge to get comprehensive restoration project data in the Delta, particularly for 2024 and onward, and we're always looking for opportunities to get up-to-date restoration data. But yeah, moving over to restoration trends. So this bar graph over here, the data is showing us that the pace of ecosystem restoration has increased, especially in recent years. So I'm just overviewing it between 2007 and 2013. There was a 1,100 acres of restoration between 2014 and 2018, 1,300 acres, and between 2019 and 2025, a whopping 1,500 acres. So you can really see how that pace has picked up in the last 6 years there. A lot of this most recent set of acreage is attributed to tidal marshes that are located in the northern and central parts of the Delta and Sassoon Marsh. In addition to completed restoration projects, I do want to acknowledge also that there is about 5,000 acres of restoration that are in progress status, and an additional 13,000 acres that are in the planning phases. So they're being planned for. So in total, all of this adds up to about 35,400 acres, this future and existing restoration project acreage. I do want to end by commending our progress on tracking restoration in the Delta in the context of the 2013 ISB review on restoration. Back then, there was a very limited map on restoration and really no high-level Delta-wide restoration coordination or targets. So we've come a long way since then. Next slide. Okay, so moving on to our performance measure on Yolo bypass inundation. And I want to provide some background on the importance of this. So when flooded, the Yolo bypass contributes to the growth of migratory fish species and is really beneficial for Delta food webs by restoring floodplain ecological functions. It also serves as an alternative route for flows and juvenile fish through the Delta. And an overview of what we're tracking here. We are tracking, our target for this performance measure is 17,000 acres inundation over 14 days, 2 out of 3 years, and then 21 days every other year, so 1 out of 2 years. And for reference on the size of that, the Yolo bypass is approximately 59,000 acres in total. So we're looking for that fraction to be inundated for that long to get the full, or not the full benefits, but the benefits of that floodplain ecological functions I mentioned earlier. So I do want to emphasize that in the last 2 years, we've been super close to meeting both of these targets. So as you can see there, the Yolo bypass was inundated for 20 days in 2024 and 2025. So super close to that 21-day target, but not quite reaching it. I also want to comment that the Big Notch project became operational in late 2025, I believe in November. And this is a big deal because the Big Notch is a part of the Fremont Weir, which is located at the very top of the Yolo bypass. It's that yellow at the very top of the map. Sorry if that's hard to see, but just for context, that's where it's located. And the Fremont Weir is a 1.8-mile stretch of levee along the Sacramento River that diverts high water from the river into the Yolo bypass. We are expecting that this project will help meet performance targets for floodplain inundation because it allows water to be diverted from the river into the bypass, even when river stage is not high enough to overtop that main 1.8-mile weir. The Big Notch can also accommodate adult salmon and sturgeon in addition to the juvenile size fish, which is an improvement over the historic Fremont Weir design, which wasn't super ideal for adult size fish and would sometimes result in stranding in that area. The Yolo bypass fish monitoring program run through IEP can help us monitor those ecosystem outcomes in response to this new infrastructure, which is just really exciting. Ecosystem level monitoring. But with that, I will pass it back to Martina. Thank you.
Okay. So the Delta Plan promotes ecosystem-based restoration. The Delta Plan, the recent ecosystem amendment, defines the desired attributes for restoration projects to contribute to the overall health of the ecosystem and to increase effectiveness of individual restoration actions. So these preferred project attributes include being large-scale, restore hydrologic and geomorphic processes, improve connectivity, support native vegetation communities, and contribute to the recovery of special status species. The Delta plan has a policy for covered actions to now disclose which of these project attributes are included. And related to this, the performance measure sets a target to increase investments to projects with either all attributes or at least 4 of these desired attributes to be 80% from the overall ecosystem restoration funding. This policy became effective April 1st last year. So far we have only 3 projects. They total about 40 million of investments, all with the preferred attributes. So for this one, this is just the first data point for the performance measure, for this performance measure. Next slide, please. The Delta serves as a migration corridor for the Central Valley salmon runs, and the Delta plan sets a goal of doubling the naturally producing salmon populations as a measure of a healthy Delta ecosystem. So after 2 years of wet conditions, some rivers show increases in salmon numbers. That's Feather River, American River, Mokelumne, Stanislaus, and Tuolumne rivers nearly doubled their annual salmon counts in 2025. However, salmon continues to decline in other Delta tributaries, and the listed species, the winter run and spring run, are approaching extremely low numbers. So overall, the population numbers remain below even the baseline levels. So now I think passing back to Scott to talk about some of the invasive species issues.
Thanks, Martina. Good morning, ISB members and everyone else in the public. I'll be briefly talking about the invasive species performance measures we have under the ecosystem chapter. Next slide, please. Just really briefly, the invasive species are plants and animals that are not native to a specific ecosystem. And once introduced and then established, they can spread quickly, causing harm to that environment and may have further impacts on infrastructure, local economy, and even human health. This is extremely problematic for an already highly invaded system like the Delta. Now, for this specific performance measure, there's actually it's large and there's numerous other invasive species related metrics, but I'll be focusing on the non-native invasives introductions metric. We have an aspirational target of no introductions of non-native invasive species in the Delta. However, it is as important to highlight the response and management of these invasive introductions, which I'll be highlighting. I have 3 that I'll be highlighting. Next slide, please. Up first, we have the nutria, a familiar face in the Delta now. Nutria is a highly invasive non-native semi-aquatic mammal and has impacts on native habitats via their burrowing and eating habits. They can damage agricultural crops and levees in the Delta. They were first found in the San Joaquin Valley back in 2017. However, they've continued to proliferate in the state and Delta despite eradication efforts. In 2025, and as you can see in the map here, this is their current sightings, at least in the Delta. And in 2025, about 2,000 individual nutrias were taken throughout California, and more than half of that actually being taken within the legal Delta and Suisun Marsh. They're found mainly in the western part of the Delta and Suisun Marsh. And unfortunately, in addition, in November 2025, there was nutria scat found in Lookout Slough. No sightings of nutria, but just the scat. And they're circled in the orange right there on the map. That's kind of where Lookout Slough is. And this is significant as it is one of the more recent restored areas in the Delta. Next slide, please. Up next, we have a newer face, the golden mussel. They were first sighted in fall of 2024 near Stockton in the shipping channel, and unfortunately has now spread in the central and south Delta and outside of the Delta following the California Aqueduct south all the way to Riverside County in Southern California. More recently, as of January 2026, they've actually spread eastward of the valley, now in the Grasslands Valley State Park on the San Joaquin River, as well as in the Frank Kern Canal near Bakersfield, circled in orange there, if you can see that. This is the first known occurrence of golden mussel in North America, and they are a threat to the ecosystem, water quality impacts, economic impact like repairs and maintenance, especially for water infrastructure. They're already currently impacting the water operations on the State Water Project. Now, following the discovery in late 2024, in 2025, the state responded to address this threat. First, by having an emergency regulation in late 2024 to add the golden mussels to the Fish and Game Code list as a restricted species, but now has been permanently adopted by the Fish and Game Commission and by OAL, and has been in effect since the new year. There was a golden mussel response framework in April 2025, which provides recommendations to local and state policymakers, managers, and the public on how to respond to the golden mussel threat. There are several prevention and mitigation strategies that are implemented, such as the Clean, Drain, and Dry initiatives, as well as boat launch checkpoints at lakes and reservoirs throughout the state. There's ongoing research on how to treat water infested with mussels, such as using chemical treatments like chloride or copper, technologies like using UV light to kill off the larvae, as well as hot water and saline immersion. And lastly, the passage of AB 149 made several changes to fish and game, vehicle, and harbor navigation codes to include other invasive mussel species, including the golden mussels. This also appropriated about $20 million in Prop 4 funding to the Department of Fish and Wildlife to address the golden mussels. Next slide, please. And lastly, we have the mute swans. Mute swans are not new in the estuary, and they've been in the estuary since 2007 in Sassoon Marsh, and in the United States since the 1800s. However, according to the recent California waterfowl breeding population survey, the population have increased drastically each year since its discovery. For example, in 2022, the population was about 1,100. In 2024, 6,900, and the latest estimate in 2025 was about 12,000. Mute swans are voracious feeders of aquatic vegetations and can negatively impact structure and function of the vulnerable wetland habitats in the Delta. Additionally, they are very aggressive towards other birds, disrupting nesting activity of native waterfowl, and have even been reported to physically injure or kill those birds, and have also been reported to attack people as well as pets. In late 2025, new legislation was passed that allowed the take of mute swans starting in 2026 under AB 764 to control their numbers. Reports of take have already been reported to CDFW as of this past couple of months. And with that, I'll be passing it on to Megan to talk about farmland convergence.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Good morning, ISB members. My name is Megan Thompson, and I'll be talking about farmland preservation. Agriculture remains both the Delta and Sassoon's predominant land use and backbone of its economy. Agriculture is critical not only for supporting local communities, but also for maintaining the Delta's rural character and identity, which is one of the components of the co-equal goals. The Delta Plan plays a key role in protecting agriculture. It prevents new unplanned urban development outside of designated areas as described in its policy DPP1, ensuring that growth does not undermine the Delta's agriculture heritage. Next slide, please. Between 2018 and 2020, a total of 667 acres of Delta farmland were converted to urban uses. This adds to approximately 2,150 acres that had already been converted in 2014, making a cumulative change of approximately 2,817 acres of farmland to urban development. This is less than 1% of the Delta agricultural land. Most importantly, these conversions occurred within areas already designated for development in both city and county general plans at the time of the Delta Plan, when the Delta Plan was adopted in 2013. In addition to urban development, restoration activities have also contributed to farmland conversion. According to a draft report prepared by the Delta Protection Commission, restoration actions resulted in the conversion of more than 16,000 acres of ag land between 2014 and 2020. Next slide. Just so you get a sense of how much has changed using data from the Department of Conservation Mapping and Monitoring Program. To the left is what the Delta landscape appeared like in 2014, and to the right is what the landscape appeared like in 2020. Next slide. Most of the changes, while small, have occurred in Sacramento County, San Joaquin County, down below by Lathrop and Mountain House, and then Yolo County. The biggest conversions from ag to urban are circled in red. Next slide. While this performance measure focuses specifically on ag to urban conversion, it is important to recognize that urban growth is not the only driver of land use change in the region. On the slide, you may also notice that there's a category called Other Land, which is shown in green, and has increased since 2014. Much of the growth in other land appears along the levees. This could be possibly associated with riparian restoration. But also it's important to note that the farmland mapping and monitoring data that we use is not allowed to isolate restoration areas. However, this category is defined as land that is heavily forested, non-agricultural, and natural vegetation, rural areas, mined land, vacant or disturbed land, and also restricted government land. And now I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Hannah to talk about flood insurance.
Hi again. I'm back to talk about a very different topic, our performance measure on the National Flood Insurance Program. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so I like to start with a refresher for this topic and why it's relevant to the Delta. So the National Flood Insurance Program provides insurance to help reduce the socioeconomic impacts of floods, and it is a program that is run through FEMA. Communities that go above and beyond the basic flood requirements that are eligible to receive a discount for their residents on National Flood Insurance Program premiums through what's called the Community Rating System, or CRS. Activities that count towards points towards discounts for residents under the CRS program include things like developing new maps and data, preserving open space and floodplain areas, and improving public response and awareness of flood threats. The Delta Plan recommends that increasing Delta community participation in this National Flood Insurance Community Rating System program is good because it promotes flood insurance availability and limits state liability in the event of a flood. This is really relevant to the Delta because as the map on the right shows, the areas in the Delta, it shows areas in the Delta that are considered what's called special flood hazard zones. These zones represent areas with about a 1% annual chance of flooding, and this constitutes a large part of the Delta, as you can see, about 77% of the legal Delta. Property owners that are located in this special flood hazard zone that also use a government-backed mortgage to purchase their home are required to have flood insurance under federal law. I want to point out that this topic also connects to many other council initiatives, like Delta Adapts and the Delta Residents Survey, which found that 1/3 of rural Delta residents and 1/5 of Delta city dwellers reported having access to flood insurance. So what are we tracking here? We're tracking the community rating system points. Again, these track the level of investment a community has made beyond the minimum NFIP requirements, as well as the discounts that a community's residents are eligible for in this program. So basically, the higher the CRS points, the larger the discount on flood insurance premiums that these residents get. So our baseline is from 2013 community rating system credit points. And then our target was by 2025, so last year, seeing a 1% increase in these points. So what did we find? We actually found last year that credit points in the Delta across all Delta communities have decreased by 15% since 2013. So what happened? Move to next slide. Yeah, so this bar chart over here is how the data appears on our website, and it tells the story of what accounts for this 15% increase. We basically saw that a couple smaller Delta communities did not earn enough points to keep up with the program or keep enrolled in the program. And these communities are Lathrop and Manteca. We also saw a noticeable decrease in points in the communities of Fairfield, as well as in San Joaquin County. I do want to acknowledge that most communities did stay pretty consistent in this program from 2013 and onward. And I want to point out that actually Sacramento and Sacramento County have invested in this program, and you can see that their orange has risen above the blue from 2013, which is good to see. I also want to connect this to the actual discounts that Delta residents are getting through this program. So the map on the left shows discount levels through CRS as of 2025, broken down by community. Every 500 of the CRS points from the bar chart on the right correlates to a 5% discount for community. The hatch lines represent city boundaries, and underlying that is counties. As you can see, much of the Delta has about a 10% discount, but Sacramento County, that dark green there, has a 35% discount for residents. For reference on price points as well, the NFIP average annual rate for a single family home premium in California was around $900 in 2023. The last thing I want to touch on here is that may be impacting NFIP and its enrollment in general is that it doesn't have long-term statutory authorization. So that means that Congress must periodically renew and extend funding for this program, which it has done 35 times since the end of 2017. The last time being the 43-day-long government shutdown that you may remember from last fall. During this time, policyholders are still covered if there is a disaster, but NFIP is unable to really issue new policies, and this can really slow down home sales and closings in flood-prone areas like the Delta. I do want to report that the National Flood Insurance Program authorization was extended by Congress through September 30th of 2026 earlier this month. So we do have an extension till then, which is good news. But yeah, that's it from me. I will pass it back to Martina to wrap us up.
Thanks. Yeah. Now bringing it back together into some of the key takeaways. Next slide, please. Annual reporting on performance measures provides a regular structured feedback across key aspects of the Delta. So what we learned today. Today we focus on ecosystem because there is a momentum, but also a need for more. We have seen good progress in terms of completed restoration acreages. Additional projects are in various stages of implementation. Going forward, the need is on to focus on increasing effectiveness of individual projects and allocating investments into projects that are large-scale, connected, and restore ecosystem functions. Responses by native species are not at the scale and pace needed. We talk about salmon population seeing some positive increases, but these are limited to few tributaries, and as I said, by below even the baselines. The need is to continue restoration implementation, and not only in size, but in quality and with broader ecosystem benefits. Native species, non-native invasive species are impacting existing ecosystem as well as the restoring areas. Invasive species will continue to be an issue. Agencies' responses need to strengthen on all fronts, from vigorous prevention to rapid responses to new occurrences, to funding and coordinated control. As far as the Delta lands and communities, as Anna mentioned, Delta residents live in flood-prone areas. Cities and communities conduct flood risk reduction activities that also decrease the flood insurance cost to their residents. And while we heard that overall the participation in the National Flood Insurance Program is lower than 10 years ago, this is very variable across the communities. And then preservation of farmland is a key aspect of the Delta economy. Less than 1% of the farmland has been lost to urban development over the past 10 years, and these losses are concentrated in locations actually designated to urban development. So this is an important issue protected by the Delta Plan policy. And one last thing, we did not speak much today about the reliable water supply, the other part of the co-equal goals. And that's because we have seen some great progress in meeting the statewide water conservation targets in the past already, especially in the cities and urban areas. And this is important because controlling demand for water through the water conservation is one of the key parts of the statewide water reliability strategy. We are expecting more data to come later in the year and looking forward to bring that information back to you. So next slide. So now kind of closing the presentation, what is ahead of us? So the annual summaries we presented, as well as the individual detailed performance measure findings and the supporting data is all available on our performance measures online dashboard. We will be continuing to communicate and engage with partners to inform actionable priorities. The dashboard will expand reporting progress by individual agencies that implement the Delta Plan. We are planning to add spatial visualizations of the data and other tools to reach even broader audiences and to spur coordination and use of the data. And lastly, we are also improving the performance measures in terms of additional metrics and methods as new data and the science becomes available. This was a recommendation in the 5-year review of the Delta Plan. So these refinements also are informed by the past and ongoing reviews by the Delta ISB. We use those for informing the performance measures. And what we learned in implementing the performance measure program is the importance of maintaining the clarity and transparency in the evaluations and the stability in terms of displaying progress towards the set performance targets. So while we are wanting to improve the performance measures, we don't want to compromise this role in supporting the clarity in the targets and supporting the accountability across the Delta Plan implementation actions. So we will be working on that next year and probably the year after that as well. So this is my last slide, or one more slide, but that brings us to the end. And yeah, we are open to your questions or comments. And thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Julie, and congratulations on your reappointment. And thank you so much, Martina and colleagues, for the nice presentation. I'd like to open it for questions from the board now. Obi.
Yeah, thank you. Nice presentation and very informative. I was thinking about how the evolving climate is incorporated into the performance measure system, whether it's indicators or targets. I saw some targets are fixed in time, but some others, like salmon doubling goal, has a time dimension to it. So I was curious how this, what we call non-stationarity in climate, how it's affecting the performance, is incorporated into this monitoring system.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I appreciate the comment. It's, I think, like, so a couple of things. Some of the performance measures, as I mentioned, are kind of tied to the hydrologic conditions. So I guess as we are interpreting the status and the progress, that's kind of like what we are taking into account. But I guess, and more importantly, also the issue of, like what I mentioned at the end, is like having kind of clear targets for the management objectives and provide some clarity and stability and just kind of clear definition versus kind of addressing the uncertainty and like unknown between like what we do, like the management actions and how it actually realized on the ground, and how is that changing, like the unknown conditions impacting, you know, the management outcomes. It's a challenge, I guess. We are trying to address it through the interpretations. And as we will be updating or maybe revising, improving the performance measures, like I think that's something we will be somewhat struggle, or like we will have to like resolve. Again, I think the clarity and simplicity in the targets, it's like what we need for the agencies to see. But yet the complexities to be accounted. So yeah, we are planning to come back to this body, I guess, you know, if you have some major revisions to, you know, help us to bring it to the end point.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you. Next is Lisa.
Hi, thank you all for a great presentation. I think you did a really nice job presenting the status. So 2 quick questions. First for you, Martina, you added some very important context to that agricultural metric when you said all the acres that had been converted were outside of targeted growth areas, maybe. I don't know if you use that word exactly, but places one might reasonably expect to convert as population grows and people need more housing. So I wondered if you considered adding a metric that was more along the lines of conversion outside of, you know, expected growth areas or something like that, just because that way that would immediately convey that. And then I also noticed that some things that were shown as ag land in the earlier data became other land in the new data. And I don't know if that was just improvements in the data or there was actual conversion, but it does suggest that one might also need to discuss sort of marginal farmland conversion or something. I mean, some of those areas look like they might be wetter. So maybe you also want that metric to exclude marginal farmland, you know, just a thought, especially if it's going to a natural land cover. Okay, that's a quick question for Martina. And then also for Scott, I just want to offer that Maryland has been very successful at controlling its mute swans. You know, it's obviously very difficult to talk about, you know, culling a species that's as charismatic as a swan, but they've been very destructive to restoration goals in the Bay. And what we found effective was not just taking adults, but also oiling the eggs to prevent hatching. And that 2-prong approach was very successful. So just thought I'd mention that.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa. Maybe I can bring in Megan. Do you want to respond to those 2 questions that relate to farmland?
Yeah, well, for the first one, or the second question about some of the areas changing, whether it was farmland actual conversion, I did have a conversation with folks at the Department of Conservation, the Farmland Mapping and Monitoring Program, and during, I believe, 2016, they did actually make some corrections based on new technology. So there were some line works. So maybe that's what you might be seeing in that. And then the first comments about updating, or what is it? Looking at marginal farmland. I think that's a really great idea. I know I'm looking into suggestions on how I could possibly update or enhance this performance measure. So.
All right. If that answers Lisa's comment and questions, we'll move on to Tanya.
Yeah, thank you everyone for the great presentation. And I have a question maybe for Hannah and then one for Martina. For Hannah, I was just curious with the restoration data, in addition to the number of acres that are being added to restoration, is there any tracking of acres that are being lost from wetlands, from existing wetlands, perhaps to urban development, or is any of that data available? That's question number 1. And then for Martina, you maybe started to respond to this when you were answering Obe's question, but I was just curious kind of more broadly when we're thinking about these performance targets, it's often important to be able to trace back our performance metrics to those types of implementation actions that we expect would affect the performance targets. And yet, of course, that can be challenging, and the broader environmental conditions, whether we have, a good water year or not, can certainly affect outcomes in ways that, are unanticipated or really interact with those actions that are being taken. So I guess, what are some of the challenges of really thinking about where the implementation actions can be leveraged to help with improving towards some of our targets, and how are you thinking about that? And is there any role that the ISB can play in supporting some of these questions? So 2 questions, one more specific maybe for Hannah, and then the bigger one perhaps for Martina.
Yeah, thank you. I can quickly answer the question pitched to me in terms of, are we tracking the loss of like restoration? And short answer is, under the performance measure I described, so restoring land water connection, we are not tracking that. I actually might signal out to Megan a little bit because yeah, as she was kind of showing in her farmland, like that does show like land changes, even though we're not directly tracking that. That might be like the closest data, but Megan, if you have any further insight on that. But shorter answer is no, we are not, but that would be neat to check.
In terms of tracking, I would refer, while it doesn't really necessarily track restoration projects, it does track like what sort of vegetation is on the ground. Right now, the data is being updated for that. So the closest data we have is the 2016 information, unfortunately. But we are in the process of gathering more current data from 2024, which is currently in the process of being QAQ'd. So that probably won't be released until sometime the end of this year. But I think that's probably the closest we can probably get right now to see what's been changed from 2016 on the ground. So hopefully that helps answer the question.
Yeah, thanks. And I guess I wasn't specifically referring to loss of restored lands, but maybe existing wetlands or natural wetlands that are being lost, if there's any data on that. But yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was good answer.
And so maybe adding to the second part, or your second question, Tanya, I guess I view the performance measures, I view them part of the overall like Delta Council, work.
Oh, you just froze, Martina.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So maybe hopefully it's better now.
Oh,
yeah, I'm just saying, like the performance measures are, supporting everything else that the council is doing. So they're kind of part of that feedback mechanism to inform, council activities and interactions and coordinations with other agencies. So kind of leveraging other efforts, or like leveraging some key, management actions. I think that kind of happens at that broader council level. Like one mechanism for that is like through maybe the Delta Plan Interagency Implementation Committee, that we could kind of like have those dialogues and explore those opportunities for, if this is not progressing well, or some major actions to maybe catalyze or, progress more permanently. For example, the Ecosystem Restoration Subcommittee of DPIC is one mechanism for doing so. I don't know if Julie wants to add anything, but that's my response. I don't know, does that get to your question? Maybe one more thing that I think there was also last time that we presented here, like suggestion, more like conceptually depicting kind of like what are the connections between just kind of the outputs and then the realization, the outcomes, what we, the desired outcomes, and like what are the knobs to turn, and what are kind of like sensitivity of those, like some of them maybe have little impact, some have bigger impact or longer term impact. So I think that's kind of what we are doing, like trying to like conceptualize this a little bit more. So then we communicate it, use it as a tool to look for the, for kind of the gaps and linkages and uncertainties in those connections.
Yeah, that's super helpful, Martina. Thank you.
I'll just add one thing. Tanya, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with your question, because many of the implementation measures for these performance measures that we're tracking are not directly controlled by the council itself. And so our constant challenge always is, how do we advertise the fact that we are keeping performance measures? How do we make sure that the departments and entities that are responsible for moving the needle on these items actually have this data? So we do, as Martina mentioned, we have the Delta Plan Implementation, Interagency Implementation Committee is one way. The science program shares this information with their contacts as well. And we share these performance measures publicly. We share them with you so that everybody can kind of have access to the same data. But I think Obe's question also was a good one. And I just want to say that even though we want to have continuity of data in collecting information about the performance measures, we don't want to change them all every single year. That would be worthless. But they're not completely set in stone. We have, over the years, the council has added things based on new information. I know that we're going to get some information when you guys put out your paper about your climate change symposium. So I think taking that all into consideration, and then each year having the team reviewing and making sure that the performance measures are tracking what we need them to be tracking. And I thought the question about, are we losing any natural wetlands, is a good one like that for us to consider. Is that something we need to think about building into the restoration tracking? Is making sure we're also not losing some on the same measure.
Thank you very much, Julie. Did Martina want to add anything, or?
No, that was good.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next is Anna.
Yes, thank you. My question follows up a little bit on Tanya's and Lisa's earlier about the restored acreage. Maybe just to take a step back, I think part of what Tanya was getting at was net versus gross, right? In the sense of what you're tracking is the gross number in terms of the restoration acres. The net, which would be what you're gaining versus what you're losing, would be an interesting one as well. And maybe along those lines, the question that came up when Hannah, when you were presenting for me, is how effective of a measure is that total acreage count as a metric for total amount of effort, resources, emphasis that is being placed on the restoration? Because of course, all acres are not created equal, right? And so the amount of time, effort, resources required to restore one acre is not going to be the same as for others, depending on what you're starting with and what type of environment it is. And so I'd just be curious to hear a little bit more about how, if I think back to that bar chart you were showing, how that bar chart, given your understanding, correlates with your maybe qualitative assessment of total, effort, resources, emphasis being placed on restoration. And to the extent that it doesn't, so for example, perhaps, and I'm just asking, the recent large number of acres is because those were easier to restore or quicker to restore or less expensive to restore. Any comment in that space, I would really appreciate.
Yeah, I think that's a really, good line of thought, and would love to comment more on that. I think in terms of like the quality that's being restored, I do want to point towards the slide that Martina talked about, the restoring ecosystem function, and the new addition to kind of our covered action system that we're assessing like different overall effectiveness metrics for performance or for restoration projects. So like, are they large scale? Do they improve connectively? Do they restore ecosystem function, supporting native vegetation and contributing to species recovery? Like now we do have check boxes that later we can go back and assess on a deeper level. I think before because we just have the acres, and that was the data that we've had for a long time. But I think the question that people want to get at is how effective are these restoration projects? And having that baseline data of this is what you're aiming for, I think will really help us in maybe tracking that later down the road. And then for the second part, just about maybe trends that I've seen and like that the recent 2019 to 2025 projects and like why that's so large. I think I made a comment that like a lot of that is in the north part of the Delta and Sassoon Marsh. And I think historically, like, yeah, a lot of the restoration is happens in those regions because it is like quote unquote like easier. And I know there's like areas in the South Delta that it's harder to do restoration in. And so we're not seeing that even distribution as we'd like. Like I know there's a priority restoration zone in the South Delta that we don't see much happening in. But I also want to say like one of the trends I've noticed is just larger restoration projects like in that chunk of like 15,000 acres restored. So like Lookout Sloughs included in that. That took a big chunk of it. Like it's yeah, like not necessarily like more number of restoration projects, but they seem to be like getting larger during that time. But yeah, that's about all the insight I can answer for right now. But if there's anything missing, happy to like follow up with you on it later. But these are great questions.
And maybe I'll just quickly comment. Part of the reason I'm asking is, you know, to the extent that the large number of acres in recent years has been, let's say, made possible by the fact that they were, relatively speaking, less resource intensive and perhaps easier to restore. I could imagine how potentially in the next block of years, you might see a decrease in acres, despite potentially there being an increase in overall resources and effort and so on and so forth. And so one might think a little bit ahead in terms of how do you message that performance metrics so that a decrease in acres does not give perhaps the mistaken impression that suddenly people have taken their foot off the gas pedal in terms of prioritizing restoration.
Yeah, I mean, this is an excellent point, I think, and I guess generally more like availability of restorable land, you know, at appropriate, I guess, at appropriate elevations. I guess it's an issue. It's an issue and like how much what we can leverage as far as the good land that it's the limited amount that it's perhaps at good locations, but is that available, right? Is there an interest in restoring? So that's a good point. One more thing I wanted to add to what Hannah was saying, like measuring kind of more the effectiveness in terms of ecosystem outcomes, is that we do have another performance measure that looks at the native vegetations and kind of growth, the nature communities growth on those restoring areas. So it doesn't get to your point really, Hannah, but it's more about the outcomes, you know, longer term, like the quality of those restoring areas.
All right. All right. Thank you. We'll move on to Diane.
Again, thank you very much for a very clear and interesting presentation. I have questions, I guess, for Martina, Megan, and Hannah that are all interrelated, related to subsidence and subsidence reversal. Is there a specific performance metric for addressing subsidence? The second question, I guess that's for Martina. The second question is for, I guess, for Megan, as you are keeping track of preservation of farmland, are you also tracking any conversion, say, to rice, which is a stabilization, you know, subsidence reversal approach, or these walking wetlands that we heard about during the subsidence review? Or is that being tracked in some way, or would that be somewhere else? And then I guess my question for Hannah related to flood insurance, you know, in communities where, say, the conversion to rice to stabilize or deal with subsidence, if that was really going forward in a big way, would that count in some way towards flood mitigation points? Because it would make a difference, it would seem, that as subsidence progresses, communities become more vulnerable to flooding if the land sinks. So these are interrelated questions. And again, thank you very much. I don't know the answers to any of them, so
Well, I can take the easy one.
Sure, I can.
First one, for the performance measures on like targets to reverse subsidence. So we have actually two performance measures, and I believe one is one we presented last time. That was the projects that to reverse subsidence in deeply subsided areas. So we have a target of, I think, 30,000 acres to reverse subsidence on those. And then we have another kind of complementary performance measures that it's tied a little bit more to like restoration opportunities. As I mentioned, like the limited availability of land in appropriate elevation. So we have targets for building, shallowly subsided areas, building those up in order to promote or make them available for later tidal marsh restoration. So yeah, we have that, and we reported last time, not much progress has been happening in terms of like acreages over the year, but that's we can include that next time as well to be more comprehensive. So now Megan, maybe you want to go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah. I was just gonna see what Martina said about the two performance measures. Since our farmland performance measure, which is also a great recommendation, doesn't actually track rice. We don't track crop types. However, I believe one of the subsidence performance measures does kind of track that, but I would like to actually refer to Hannah, since that's one of the performance measures that she's following, so she would actually know more.
Yeah, so in
Hannah?
one of the two, oh, sorry if I cut off somebody. But in one of the two subsidence related performance measures, it's called subsidence reversal and carbon sequestration. So this one focuses on the central delta, but we do track annual rice acreage in the delta because of the relationship between subsidence reversal and rice. So we do use Land IQ data to track that. And I think the most recent year we have for that is 2022. But yeah, in terms of your question about flood insurance and conversion to rice, Diane, which I don't know off the top of my head the coordinator's manual for like the CRS, the community rating system, and what counts and doesn't count is pretty robust. But I love, yeah, I would hope that something like that would count for it. There is a section of that book that talks about like floodplain management plans. So this is speculative and I don't know if officially, but I'd like to think that like if you do plan for like rice in a floodplain and like kind of call that open space, that maybe that could count towards it. But a lot of bureaucracy in trying to get something to count for the federal government. So yeah, I think that's it for me.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, moving on to Peter.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thank you for that presentation. Julie, I think you partially answered the question I was going to ask, but this really is a remarkably holistic assessment of things going on in the Delta and even beyond the Delta. And it's beautifully presented in the storyboard format. And I just wondered how this was being received by your peers, directors of other agencies, local governments, the legislature, and whether you see this effort actually helping to make a difference, because it does go beyond individual agency responsibilities and it allows people to see the whole picture and the progress that is or is not being made. So I just wondered if you wanted to expand on that a little bit from your perspective at the top.
I mean, it's an excellent question because I think we spend a lot of time talking to people about it and showing them the resources available. I was just communicating with Rachel. She obviously leads our DPIC effort in coordinating all of that. And we were saying that with recent leadership changes, we do worry that not everyone is entirely aware of their role in all of this. So I think, Jessica especially is one that's really constantly going out there and talking to people about this. I think reflecting on some of the conversations that we've had recently with the legislature, one of our biggest challenges in the Delta is getting funding for these things and sort of bringing the recognition up to the people that make the funding decisions. And we always say that budget is policy. And so when we hear that, top priorities are things like clean water and the economy, the ecology, we expect to see that reflected in the budget. And so that is a big part of, bringing all of these performance measures forward, is to try to get some generation of interest from the legislature and others that are in charge of those budget decisions. We recently had Prop 4 pass, and we saw that there was about $300 million allocated to the budget for the Delta, and about 4 times that amount for the coast. And so I think, bringing things like that to the attention of policymakers and continuing to have those conversations about what our needs are, and being able to show them these performance metrics of how we can move the needle when money is put into these things, is really important. And it's critically important that we continue to track these things. And, another concern that we have is that some of our data tracking has been cut and changed through different mechanisms with the federal government, and that impacts our ability to really track this data. So I think advocating for continued science is another big role that we have in this. I would just say we remain hopeful that people are listening to what we're putting out, and using our DPIC group as a mechanism to continue to reinforce to people what their role in implementation is, and then showing them that we're holding people accountable through the performance measures is really critically important.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Steve, you have your hands
Yeah,
up.
thank you for those really great presentations. I think you sort of discussed the question I had, but specifically about salmon doubling. That's going to be a very challenging one to achieve there. There are a lot of things outside the Delta that are problematic for salmon, and a lot of other actors that may be working at cross purposes for this outcome, if not the intention. I'm just sort of wondering specifically what will happen or might happen when we don't make any progress on that goal.
Is that a question to Julie?
Maybe it is to Julie. Yeah.
No. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it is extremely, I guess, aspirational. And I think we have the target date 2065, I think, for the doubling goal. But yeah, I know we are not, I don't know, we are not getting in the right direction. And nature producing, that's even higher bar. So I don't know. This is complex. I don't know what to say to that. I think it's more just kind of like the ultimate measure, or like one of the kind of like most ambitious measure that kind of tells us that, hey, we need to be doing more, like just kind of like, focusing the resources and keeping our sight to the end goal. I think that's kind of the purpose.
I think I would just add that iterating on aspirational measures is something we probably realize is going to have to happen at some point along the way. But I also think like lowering the bar too soon doesn't send the message to the people that are in charge of implementing that measure. If we just change the measures to lower it so it's easy for them to not meet. So I think, we'd have to take some advice from the science program and say, is it no longer realistic? And then when would the council determine that is a performance measure that we need to take a look at? I guess that's how I'd put that.
So I really don't mean to discourage you from it. I think it is physically and biologically achievable goal. It's more socially and political where the challenges are, and just getting the level of coordination across agencies alone would be necessary, and maybe the council can play a leadership role there, which I would really encourage.
All right. Kathleen.
Yeah, I want to thank you for your great presentation and for the material in the plan, which was very easy to follow. My question follows on from Diane's question about subsidence, which is, have you considered looking at subsided land in proximity to the levees, in particular looking at subsidence reversal projects that are closer to the levees in order to increase the elevation in that critical area, and also looking at performance measures like seepage through the levees, because that turns, good agricultural land into marginal land or not usable land, and maybe you could use those areas for your restoration projects. And that might be a new way to look at this challenge that we're going to face as the water levels in the rivers rise.
Maybe I can start, respond, and then I don't know, Hannah, if you want to respond too. But yeah, I mean, the target itself is just like acreage target for the subsidence, but we can definitely tell, and we have a project locations as well. We can definitely like make it more nuanced as far as this is closer to the levee. This is, this area, this is in the, more deeply subsided area. So we have that. I'm saying we have that information, but we don't have a target that is nuanced like that yet. Maybe that's something. I think the subsidence reversal performance measure is one of the things that we are kind of thinking about improving and expanding. So yeah, but right now it's pretty straightforward.
Thank you,
Hannah.
Yeah, I think my answer echoes a lot of Martina's sentiment for particularly the subsidence reversal and carbon sequestration. This is where we track like deeply subsided lands. So I think that's yeah, we're like, I think we're mostly pivoting, like now we're pivoting from like where there was only like 6 known subsidence reversal projects in the Delta, like all run by Department of Water Resources, to where now they're kind of starting to broaden out. Like we had that grant from the Delta Conservancy that sponsored 3 more like subsidence reversal projects. So I think, yeah, we would like to have it become more nuanced, because I recently I do a lot of research for this specific performance measure, and I was recently made aware of like, hey, having like subsidence reversal next to levees makes a lot of sense so the islands don't flood, right? But yeah, I think in terms of like, yeah, just developing a nuanced target, we do kind of need that science backing for that. And like, that's where like, I did want to like really commend you guys on the subsidence reversal review that your board is doing. Like that is something that I use like a lot to kind of like structure this performance measure. Like it is undergoing revisions right now, so we'd like to make it more nuanced in terms of like what does the Delta need and promote that with data. But yeah, it's all kind of emerging right now. So yeah, love any feedback. The data landscape for subsidence is still a little bit messy in general.
Can I circle back on one thing, Inge?
Absolutely.
Jessica's always on top of things, and she sends me little messages to make me sound smart. So this is why continuity is so important at our council, right? She's been there since the beginning. She let me know that the salmon doubling goal was set in law by the California legislature. That we understand it's a high bar. So I guess that just kind of helps give some context to that conversation.
Thank you. Yeah. So that makes it pretty hard to remove or alter, I guess. Yeah. So thank you all for great discussion, great question and answer session. I just want to add a little question, I think for Hannah. When you were talking about floodplain and how many days, I realized that, setting performance measures is one of the hardest things to do. But how many days the Yolo bypass floods. So I was thinking of my times driving across it or over it, and there's huge differences, right? So sometimes all the grass still sticks out, all the rice remnants stick out, and other times it looks like an ocean. And I'm sure that makes a huge difference for the ecosystem. So how do you measure that? I mean, any water in there, or how do you make a distinction?
Yeah, that's a great question and something I really relate to. I live in Davis, so I commute over the Yolo bypass all the time and see what you're seeing. But the data that we're using for this, we use a lot of gauge data. So from the Fremont weir, there's one other weir that we also incorporate. Like if they're flooding in at over 6,000 CSF, that's kind of one indicator that we use, but we also are using Sentinel-based remote sensing to look at like the level of water. And that, I know with remote sensing, like it doesn't necessarily capture the depth. That's something that would be wonderful to do. And I know we just got new LiDAR data, so maybe possible eventually. But yeah, we kind of use these different like gauge sensors and remote sensing as like puzzle pieces to piece that together. So like, yeah, the data says slightly different things. I'll confer with like a colleague, and yeah, that's what we're using as data right now. But yeah, would love to see improvements going into the future.
Okay, so I'm just trying to capture what you said. So you have a certain cutoff number, 6,000 CFS or what?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that correlates to, I think that gets into modeling, which is where I get a little bit muddled with things personally. But yeah, 6,000 CFS translates to about like 17,000. I can probably from our data sheet and the modeling, like get the relationship for that for you if you want. But that is like, yeah, each day with that number correlates to it. That's the data that we use. So yeah, I'm happy to get that to you in more detail. Don't have it off the top of my head. I haven't looked at it in a bit.
Actually, the CFS don't mean much to me. For me, it's like, does the grass stick out, and are there huge areas not covered, or is everything covered, kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, a huge limitation with this data and how we interpret it right now is we don't really, like, we're not able to say, like, this is the depth that we're getting. We're only able to say, like,
No,
is water
not
there or not.
depth, not depth, but more maybe coverage with water, you know? I mean, just area covered with water.
Yeah, the Sentinel satellites, that shows where water is covered. Like,
okay, so you can track that. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So that shows where the water is. Sorry if I misunderstood.
Oh, devil's always in the details. So yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. This was a great presentation, great discussion. Any further questions or other? No, not from the board. So do we have any public comments, Edmund?
Yes, we have a public comment from Deirdre Desjardins, but just as a reminder for folks online, if you do have a public comment, please use the raise hand function in Zoom. Deirdre, you have the ability to unmute your microphone. Thank you.
Yeah, Deirdre Desjardins with California Water Research. And I had the privilege of knowing Bill Keir, who helped get the salmon doubling goal passed. And I just wanted to point out that the thought that the salmon doubling plan might not be achievable is from within the framework of power of that current water uses are entrenched, and the pattern of water diversions that has decimated salmon runs can't be significantly changed in a way that benefits the runs. And Bill fought for an entire generation. And Zeke Grader, who is the head of the Pacific Coast Federation of Salmon Fishermen. And they're just the most obvious, that and the salmon fishing communities on the North Coast are the most obvious symptom of our overdiversion of water from the Delta. So it's not unachievable. It's just unachievable if you assume that there can't be major changes in our existing water diversion patterns. And I did want to say that there hasn't been a mention of the defunding of the U.S. Geological Survey monitoring stations, but that should be a huge concern about any implementation of monitoring on the Delta, because that data is foundational for flows and salinity. And USGS has maintained that network for a long time. But we can't do science in the Delta if we don't have the data. Thank you.
Would anybody like to, thank you, Deidre. Would anybody like to say something? Respond? I don't see any raised hands, so we will just acknowledge the comment. Deidre, thanks. Are there any more public comments, Edmund?
There are no additional public comments.
Okay. Well, I think we conclude this agenda point then. Thanks again to everyone involved, and move on to the agenda number 4. The Delta Lead Scientist Report. Lisamarie, I hand over to you.
Great, thank you, Chair Wener, and thank you all for having me here again. I was just presenting to you in December, but there are some updates to share, and I'm happy to do that. Also, welcome to Alyssa, and just a note of how much we're going to miss Jonathan when the month comes to an end. All right, so let's go ahead and move into the next slide. Thank you. So since I presented to you in December, I'm just going to highlight 3 sort of areas that we've been active in these last 2 months. And in particular, if you go to the next slide, I'll have the outline of what we're going to focus on, where we are with the Bay-Delta Water Quality Control Plan update, our role in that, the current peer reviews that we have going on right now, which are focused on Chinook salmon, the Blue Carbon Symposium that's coming up in 3 weeks, the Nature-Based Solutions Summit that we just had at the California Natural Resource Agency building, and then just any questions. So next slide, please. We'll just move forward. So the Bay-Delta Water Quality Control Plan, as you know, we're in the midst of the public feedback portion of the proposed updates to the Bay-Delta Plan. Specifically, this is the latest draft version, the December 2025 revised draft version, and Chapter 13 of the supporting draft staff report. And 2 weeks ago, the State Water Board had a 3-day public hearing to receive comments from the public, and the turnout was really high. The recordings are here. There's a link if you're interested in listening to them. More than 200 individual comments were made orally, and then, of course, there were the submissions of written reports, written comments that were also due. And we are one of those submitting comments. So I don't know how many total comments, but there's a lot of oral ones that would be good for you to take a look at if you have a chance. They're part of your meeting package. The letter that we sent, and I want to give credit to Steve Culberson in particular, because his leadership on this had to track through, he had to track through many drafts to see what had changed with each new draft. And he led that letter writing. And there's just so you know, as in the past, there are several references to the Delta Independent Science Board playing a role in reviewing the 8-year ecological outcomes report. So you are called out in here still. The council provided comments on key elements of the revised draft plan, with particular emphasis on ensuring that the final plan be rooted in best available science, include independent review of science actions and scientific monitoring surveys to inform adaptive management of the plan, and also support open and transparent and collaborative science and information sharing moving forward. As stated in previous letters, the council stands ready to contribute to the state water board's implementation of the final plan, particularly as it pertains to providing high-quality, independent, and relevant scientific review of actions and programs. And these contributions are directly in line with the council's statutory mission and core functions. I highly recommend taking a look at the letter that we wrote, as well as the recordings if you get a chance. It's a lot of time on YouTube, but there's some really, really thoughtful responses from the public that are going to take a while for response, because the response is not immediate. It's going to take a while for the board to take the water board to take a look at those and address them. Okay, next slide, please. All right, independent peer review. We're in the middle of 2 peer reviews right now. I spoke about these in December, but we're making progress. I'm going to be on time, it looks like, for both of these. So we're in the final stages of that winter run review. In particular, it's on the annual loss experienced in early 2024 and early 2025 for this endangered species. The review was called for by the Bureau of Reclamation, the Department of Water Resources, and it was scoped by an interagency planning team that included NOAA, Fish and Wildlife Service, and California Department of Fish and Wildlife. The panel has just submitted their report, so we are reading it right now. It's going through editorial review, and we may be able to release it by the end of the month. And of course, all of these are made public. All of the intermittent steps are all public on our website. So we'll keep you posted when that gets released. The second one to highlight is our spring run juvenile production estimate peer review, again called for by Department of Water Resources. And this the spring run JPE, it started in January, and the panel it's a 5-person panel. It's charged with reviewing the approach to how the annual JPE is arrived at for spring run salmon. Next week, we have a public meeting on February 24th at the CNRA building, and this is where the 5-member panel will share their initial assessment, and public contributors are invited to provide any additional information that they believe the panel should consider in their final report. So we're on track for this to come out in April, and we're hoping for a good turnout in February. Everything looks to be on track. The slides are starting to be produced, and looks like we're ready for that meeting next week. Okay, next slide, please. So in 3 weeks, we're having this long-awaited Bay-Delta Blue Carbon Symposium. We're collaborating, as usual, with the UC Davis Coastal and Marine Sciences Institute to host a symposium that the full title is Accounting for Blue Carbon in the Bay Delta, Science, Policy, and Practice. And it's going to be a full-day event on Thursday, March 5th from 9 to 4 p.m. Registration is open. So there's a QR code here to make it easy. You have to register to attend, but it's free. And we really look forward to a nice turnout. I particularly encourage you to attend because you're interested in nature-based solutions, climate mitigation efforts, and as well as, follow up to the Emerging Climate Science Symposium. There's quite a few talks that will address changing climate drivers on blue carbon. And also, this could inform the next draft of the subsidence review. I'm going to just make sure you understand that blue carbon is a simple term for carbon that's captured and stored in a water environment. So marine, coastal, and aquatic systems often are called blue carbon. Tends to be more marine, coastal, but it's being used now also for inland wetlands and even rice paddies because of the role of water. We have an impressive lineup of speakers and panelists, and there's a really deep bench of scientists in the Bay Delta already that we expect to attend. The symposium is going to bring the researchers, policymakers, natural resource managers, practitioners, and any other interested parties to the same room and online. It's a hybrid approach to explore the science and policy of blue carbon in the Bay Delta, what we know from the past and how that can take us into the future. There's also going to be a field trip on the second day, Friday, March 5th, led by Jared Dixon, who you might recall. He is going to lead a field trip at the Nature Conservancy's Staten Island Preserve to take a look at some of their carbon projects and where they are right now in implementation. So again, links are on here, and we're looking forward to a nice turnout and potentially a paper to come out of the symposium. Okay, next slide, please. All right, I'm going to just close by highlighting a summit that happened the end of January. It was the first Nature-Based Solutions Summit for California's Natural Resources Agency. And it was in the big auditorium. There was multiple agencies supporting it. I'm sorry, funding sources, including Trust for Public Land. The summit brought together a diverse group of leaders to share experiences, provide insights, and guide next steps. I'm going to call out the Jane Lubachenko and Heather Tallis interview because it talked about national and global scale insights on reframing the narrative. So getting away from this economy versus environment perspective, but rather think about accounting for the ways that nature is actually helping the economy. The recordings for the plenary sessions can be found online. Here's the link, and you can see here I highlighted this panel. Was one of my favorite parts was the not just the interviews with global leaders, but with farmers and folks that are on the ground doing the work and working in very, very different environments, whether it's fire, beneficial uses of fire, or orchard management, or wetland restoration, and river floodplains, and so on. There was a real breadth of types of environments discussed. And so that's something that, again, if you want to watch these future solution summits, they're going to focus on all those independent landscapes and then in different approaches in those landscapes. So the other thing I want to highlight from here is, we had a table, and there's Brooke Eastman manning our table. There was a lot of showing from public community groups as well as agencies in the room. So a lot of information shared, and some of those links can be found on the website. I want to also highlight that because you're doing this nature-based solutions consideration for a review, the CNRA was promoting their progress on California's nature-based solutions climate targets, and in particular the 30% of land and water being protected by 2030. And they showed that based on $9.8 billion that has been spent since 2020, they're 59% on their way to that goal. And now we have another $8 billion coming from the Prop 4 funds and some more that will continue that work. So it looks like we're on target potentially for the 2030 goals. And those, again, are intermediate goals that hopefully get us to carbon neutrality by 2045. So these are all stepwise successes. It's kind of like the performance measures you just heard about. We think about these things in chunks and use these smaller windows of time to illustrate progress. And so again, there was local communities, tribes, lots of different perspectives in the room, and it was nice to build out that community for nature-based solutions. These last 8 talks are basically grasslands, deserts, inland wetlands, coasts, farmlands, chaparral and shrublands, and forests are the focal areas. And I encourage you to track this work through the year, and maybe it'll help you brainstorm your review on nature-based solutions. And that's the last comment I was going to make. I do want to point out that the CNRA was in form, I should say they were out in force at the AAAS meeting. Oh my gosh, AAAS, you guys are this Association of American.
Something science.
Yeah, I'm just laughing. Lisa Wenger and I were there together, and I checked.
Advancement of science, advancement.
Advancement. That's the last A. Yeah.
We're advancing science.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So we were just there last week, and CNRA was there discussing these, promoting these projects. But Lisa Wenger and I were there for a panel on adaptive management in estuaries. So Lisa talking about the Chesapeake, I was talking about the Bay Delta, and then Scott Redmond was talking about Puget Sound. And we had a lot of really nice discussion with the audience on how do you engage people across these huge watersheds and actually make progress. And so, in closing, I just wanted to give Lisa Wenger a chance to speak to it if she had anything she wanted to highlight from AAAS.
Yeah, thanks, Lisamarie. It was a great experience to get that opportunity to compare notes across these estuary programs and generate some good discussion. And then, of course, the broader meeting had a lot of food for thought too. I went to a session on equitable water access and policies to support that. And so I think, it's a great place to just really get your mind going on ways to improve systems. And so it was a great experience. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, and so that's really the updates for December and January, and here we are. So any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Any questions? Doesn't look like it, Lisamarie. Thanks a lot for reporting out. You gave us a lot to look up. So, and it all sounds really interesting. Thank you. So are there any public comments?
Yes, we have one from Deirdre Desjardins. And just as a reminder for folks online, if you do have a public comment, please use the raise hand function in Zoom. And with that, I'll turn it over to Deirdre, and your microphone can be unmuted. Thank you. Yep, Deirdre?
Oh, I guess maybe my microphone is still unmuted. I was waiting for to come up. So there was a peer review in 2023 of DWR's new climate scenario methodology. And one of the reviewers was Ruby Ling at Pacific Northwest Lab. And she commented that the interdecadal Pacific Oscillation, IPO, is strongly correlated with precipitation in trends in California watersheds, and particularly the declining trend that we've seen since 1980. So this has become a major thing to follow up because the paper by Jeremy Clavins et al., like these top researchers, found that the shift in the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, which is related to the IPO, is 53% forced since 1950. And so it explains why we had a very wet period, a record, the wettest period in 78, in the last 1,200 years since 78 to 99, and why we had the driest period from 2000 to 2022. It's not just temperature effects. And I'm wondering if there's any plans for the Delta Science Program to follow up on. It was a really important comment by a peer reviewer in the letter.
Thank you for that, Deirdre. I agree with you, and actually the Clavins paper as well. I'm wondering if this is not going to be part of the Emerging Climate Symposium results, which is, really our best dive right now into some of these new findings. So I think I would defer to ISB to highlight that gap if it exists. So we don't have anything right now where we're pursuing
Let
These are
me,
the DWR's the conditions that they use in their climate modeling.
so I am going to be giving a presentation to the Interagency Ecological Program on these shifts, and I've been looking at atmospheric river shifts and how they're correlated. It turns out that Pineapple Express atmospheric rivers have been, which are the wettest atmospheric rivers and deliver the most precipitation, have been declining on the West Coast, and they're strongly correlated with the PDO. So we're still getting maybe the same amount of atmospheric rivers, but they're delivering significantly less moisture. And if you look at it, that we have had a decline of 7 million acre feet on average a year of runoff in the Sacramento River watershed. It's huge. It's staggering. And like Oroville Basin, there's a study by the Scripps folks that 66% of the precipitation is atmospheric river precipitation. 2/3. It's very high. So it's not a small effect. And I can provide some of that. Unfortunately, there wasn't any space there wasn't really anybody who was knowledgeable about these kind of climate shifts at the Emerging Climate Symposium. But there's Clemens, there's a number of other people who've been looking at it and looking at also the persistent La Nina-like trend that we've seen in the Pacific since 1980.
Obi has his hand raised. Obi, please go ahead.
Yeah, just to follow up on Lisamarie's comment, I think the best thing is to wait for the summary of the climate symposium to come out. And at a previous meeting, we discussed, so what are the next steps after that symposium's summary comes out? And I think that would be the time to discuss perhaps what are the next research topics that we should focus on. One of the things that we identified was how many of these robust signals should be incorporated into the planning work by DWR and other agencies. So I think that's on our radar. If I remember correctly, at one of the previous meetings, we had an item to follow up on the outcomes of the science symposium. Just let's get the report out and then discuss.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you. Looking forward to the report.
I did want to say that there is a bit of dispute about this because for the stochastic weather generator, Andrew Schwartz averaged out all of that, what he called internal variability, and looked at linear trends. And he said, oh, that's all internal variability. And it turns out that assumption is wrong. But DWR is kind of digging in the Delta tunnel hearing that's the right approach. And I've been in here advocating, I think, you've seen me since 2022 that we need to look at this because that's my background is in nonlinear dynamics. And it started becoming pretty clear that we may have seen a regime shift. But there's a lot more new research that's pointing to that.
Right. It sounds like this is to be continued. Thank you, Deidre and Obi. So before we discuss our review of the Delta Draft Science Plan, we'll take a quick break. And I'd say thank you, Lisamarie, and we'll reconvene at 11:30. Right. Welcome back to the February meeting of the Delta Independent Science Board. We will continue with agenda item 5, which is a discussion of our review of the draft Delta Science Plan. And I'll just provide some background and then hand over to Diane and Tanya. So the Delta Science Program requested a formal review of the Delta ISB at its public meeting on November 12th of last year and released the draft 2026 Delta Science Plan on November 19th, 2025. The Delta ISB will now discuss its review of the draft 2026 Delta Science Plan and may act on next steps for submitting its comments to the Delta Science Program. Prior to the meeting, Drs. McKnight and Heikkila drafted a memo summarizing the comments. They will now provide an overview of comments and then lead a discussion on the content of the memo and any changes needed. Delta lead scientists Dr. Windham-Myers and Dr. Hollis Jones of the Delta Science Program are also on hand to answer any questions. So I'll hand over to you, Diane and Tanya.
Thank you very much, Inge. And I want to start off by explaining the overall approach we took towards writing our review, which was to structure the comments in the context of the focused questions we were provided to address. And so that's how the review is structured. I want to next highlight that, our overarching feedback was that this plan reflects a constructive process by which the developments are moving ahead in a collaborative way, and we see this as very positive. And we have some other general comments at the beginning. And then I thought I could go through question by question here, and then Inge, do you want to hold comments from the members of the board after I've summarized the content of the review for all the questions, or do we want to take comments question by question, feedback question by question? How would you recommend?
It's really up to you, but I would probably prefer if you summarize first and then we get into the question. And
Okay,
comment.
because they're somewhat related. All right. And so the first question was whether or not the plan was bold, flexible, and forward-looking. And we said in our response that yes, in general, this is shrinking on my screen. I can't read it, so I have a hard copy here. Could you make it a little bit bigger? That we commended the inclusive process, and the plan highlights areas where there's increased flexibility, such as horizon scanning and scenario planning for different futures and the use of traditional knowledge. And we highlighted that the integration of social ecological framework was bold, but then we highlighted ways in which the social science could become more focused, to be more the plan for social science could be more focused given the broad scope of social science and the ways in which social science is relevant to moving ahead in terms of science in the Delta. And we specifically also highlighted that the incorporation of traditional ecological knowledge is bold, and these other ways of knowing, but that there could be more of a plan to promote younger scientists from these diverse backgrounds being engaged in this process. And so those are recommendations with respect to the overall boldness of including social science. And then the other point at which we made a comment had to do with these funding opportunities for targeted funding and making sure that those continue to be subject to a rigorous selection criteria to maintain trust in the process. So that is our overall response to the first question. Oh, no, there's one more, which is the plan could be more forward-looking. If you could scroll back down by recommending particular types of modeling tools, analytical tools, to keep moving ahead, and we highlight that. I should have said at the very beginning that Tanya and I greatly appreciate all the constructive comments of the other members of the board as we tried to integrate your comments. So I want to thank everyone on the board for that. Now we can move to the second question about whether the actions are appropriate, actionable, and feasible. And we agreed that many of the actions are appropriate and feasible. However, we highlighted that there was not as much emphasis on the issues of subsidence and levee stability and the overall the hydrologic functioning of the delta, and that this underrepresentation of this topic is a concern because this issue is central to the future of the delta and related, as we highlighted in our subsidence our subsidence report. We moving to actionable, one of our comments was that these plans provide useful guidance for the science community for certain. However, it's not clear who the responsible parties are, and we would recommend a more explicit acknowledgement of how to operationalize some of these actions. Then the final point about feasibility is tied to, excuse me, the connection between the science plan and the science action agenda. Again, clearly the science plan is a broader plan, and the science action agenda is updated in the context of that plan. So maybe the connection to the plan should be part of the science action agenda, but clarifying these connections would be helpful. And that fell under this context of feasibility. Tanya, interrupt me if you want to add anything to this summary.
You're doing great, Diane.
Okay, I'm going to have another sip of tea right now. And then the third question was whether or not the Delta ISB review and product findings were sufficiently leveraged. And the answer to that question is an overall yes, in terms of how the plan acknowledged the Delta ISB reviews and inputs, and it contains actions to strengthen the role of social science, which was important. There's integration of the DMDU reviews under Grand Challenges 2 and 3. And so even though the plans doesn't provide explicit tracing back to each of the Grand Challenge, we felt we could see this connection to the Delta ISB reports in the plan. moving ahead, the other question, how should progress towards achieving the plan actions be tracked and shared? There were several suggestions that members of the board commented on to address this. And we felt, or the consensus that we noted here in our synthesis of the comments was that an approach to evaluating the performance of the plan would be constructive and again, related to metrics. This information could be connected to the Delta Science Tracker in some way and in the evaluation of the Science Action Agenda implementation. And we included one in a comment. We included one of the suggestions, such as a public dashboard that could make this tracking more accessible. But again, we highlight that the Mavens Network and State of the Bay Delta Science are also important avenues for conveying, for tracking. And then, Tanya, do you have a comment on that, or can I move ahead? Then the next question was, do the current momentums accurately reflect ongoing or planned efforts, and are there any that are missing? We applauded the plan for including these current momentum examples as being useful and important for presenting the feasibility of the actions. Many of these actions will take time to achieve, so it'd be worthwhile. It's worthwhile to note this progress and the intentions. And we felt that, however, to acknowledge that these examples are examples that may not be fully representative of the suite of activities that may be ongoing. The plan could, the authors of the plan could consider potentially renaming the current momentum to something like foundational examples or some other word that conveys that they're not totally inclusive of everything that's going on. And tracking these examples systematically in a portfolio could be helpful as well. And so that's the main body of our overall response in terms of the questions. And then we have specific section feedback that maybe now would be a good time to take before moving on to those, to talk about among the board comments about that. Those are synthesis of the comments with respect to those questions. Maybe we could take a question one by one, or the first question first. And
then just one thing to add, what Diane just presented is where we tried to synthesize across the individual comments that we received across the ISB, the section by section, or the section specific feedback, that is not synthesized really. It's a lot of bullet points from individuals that we've pulled together and tried to clean up a little bit, but we tried to capture everyone's feedback in that process. We might want to take a look at some of that and see whether or not there's some details that are a little too verbose, or might be a little off point or something like that. We can later, but I think the big picture questions are where we want to really dive in to begin with.
Yeah, and we wanted to keep this document succinct and readable to match. One of the strengths of the Delta Science Plan is it's a readable document. It's not overly long or long-winded, and so we wanted to match that in our review. Obe.
Thank you, Dan and Tanya. I think the response or comment letter looks great, and you both did a great job synthesizing, and I agree with basically most of the comments. I highlighted 3 or 4 things, but I think a couple of them are I see that they have been incorporated. So I want to highlight a couple of things that I think we need to perhaps highlight in the overarching section. Now, one of my comments was that this draft plan perhaps intentionally extend beyond the traditional scientific activities, but it extends into science policy interface, particularly those related to science management, governance coordination, and particularly also the funding and equity and so forth. So I think that might be intentional and that might be okay. I think perhaps some clarification up front would be helpful, that the science plan also includes those actions that support decision making rather than policy choices. That was a high level observation I had. The second, I'll go through all of them, that way I don't have to go back.
Sure.
The other comments, I think your implementation observation, I think is right on. Like, we need some identification of who is going to do what type of indication in the plan. That would be very helpful. The third one was a public dashboard. I think you already indicated that. And finally, the current momentum, I thought there would be more examples. Most of them had only one example of current momentum. And I think your idea of identifying them as foundational example is probably a good way to address that. But I felt like decision making under deep uncertainty perhaps should be elevated as a current momentum. And something that was also not included was what came out of the emerging climate science research symposium. I think that could be a current momentum aspect or foundational example that could be identified in the plan. Those are my comments. Other than that, I agree with the comment letter that you have prepared. Thank you.
Thank you, Obe. My understanding is that the Delta Science, our Independent Science Board activities are not specifically part of the plan of the current momentum, but they're something, we were asked a specific question as to whether the plan was responding to our reports. So we would need to frame it that way, is my understanding.
Yeah, there was
Yes.
one question on the inclusion of the ISB review and product findings. But it would have been nice to have a crosswalk of what was included in the plan based on our past reviews, but I didn't see that clearly. So some of our reviews presumably are relevant to this, I think, or not?
I think we did mention that crosswalk comment in the
Okay.
letter.
Yeah, that's
go to page.
Yeah,
okay,
that's
great,
in
then.
there.
Okay.
Maybe I think I've got a hard copy here so I can find it.
No, that's fine. I think you may have it. Don't worry about it if it is there.
Yeah. And the other point, in terms of identifying which entity is responsible for which step, that's
right.
Broadly covered.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, my first comment was on the overarching comment was it's more than a science plan. It addresses the funding, addresses the governance issues and equity issues. It may be intentional. It might be okay. I think should be recognize it as such.
And then I think this was a topic for Lisamarie to respond to about whether it was intentional to be at this particular point at the interface. So Lisa, Marie, do you have a comment?
Yeah, sorry, specifically at what interface? I didn't.
So the interface of science planning, the policy of science planning, and which is different than the way about in which policy incorporates science. But this, if I understand correctly, what you're saying, Obi, is that this plan includes that interface of how science is planned for. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's basically beyond a traditional plan for science, but it goes beyond to address governance and funding, and so it goes into the science policy interface. That was my observation reading it. And that might be intentional and it might be okay, but perhaps upfront, maybe there should be some statement that it includes how the science could be used for decision support, not for planning policy. That was my observation, but.
Well, I can respond briefly. I saw that Hollis and Rachel Klopfenstein are both on the call too, and I welcome them to chime in. The goal all along is to make basically to guide and organize and coordinate the community towards impact and action, things that are going to work. And so that, that means stepping into policy relevant suggestions. So there is a part of this that does point towards policy, but it's from a science perspective as what's needed to help policymakers evaluate outcomes of different scenarios or actions that they may take. So, or actions that they may operationalize. So, that's you're seeing a bleeding over, but it's with the intent that this be actually useful to move the needle. And I don't know if Obey has another comment or if Rachel or Hollis wants to step in.
No, that's all I have. But
I think calling it out, like you said, Obey, making it a little bit more clear,
yes,
would be a good idea. So again, Rachel and Hollis, please step in if you want.
No, I think you covered it, Lisamarie. Yeah, I saw your comments, Obey, and definitely we don't want to be, prescribing policy, more just giving a guidance on how science can be used or how science can be done and connected in these ways to be more accessible for decision making. So thank you for your comment.
That's good.
Lisa, would you like to comment now?
This is very relevant to one of my main comments. So first of all, I just want to agree that you did a great job, and I appreciate the way you've synthesized things, and I have no I have maybe one minor concern with the front matter, but because of this leaking into science management, I would call it, I do think that encouraged the board to make some comments that also looked like science management comments. And I just want to remind us all, and I'm guilty of this too, that even though we have a background in science management, our role here is to really stick to the science adequacy for, improving decisions and adaptive management. And so, we have this extraordinary privilege of being seen by most people as unbiased and independent. And so some of the comments, I think, start to slip into this area of us suggesting policy. And so it's really a nuanced point, but I'm going to make some suggestions in the hard copy of language that needs to be slightly modified, just to clarify that, because some people will see some of our comments as having policy direction. And it comes down to, in large part, what Julie said, budget is policy. So I think we have to be super careful whenever we talk about budgets and how spending should be or something like that. So that I just wanted to give people a heads up and hear if anybody disagrees with that. I do think it is appropriate for us to say things like, if you don't spend more money, you will not achieve this goal. Like scientifically speaking, this will require more effort. That's a valid statement, but I think we have to be careful about broader statements. So, and then I'll just add the one concern I have about the front matter. And again, this was triggered by the question, is this actionable? But the science action agenda is the place where they get into more actionable stuff. So I wonder how much we might need to soften some of our comments about, like, you're not supposed to go all the way to actionable, I guess, in the plan. And maybe there are some folks online who can help clarify this. But I think we want to be careful about saying, well, this should really spell out exactly who's going to do what and that sort of thing, because I don't think that is the goal of this plan, as I understand it. But I'm willing to be corrected.
Lisa, maybe to your point, which I agree with, it could just be that there needs to be stronger language within the plan about that connection to the science action agenda and where that action
Yes.
gets operationalized. So for a reader who may not have the whole picture. So maybe that's one way to thread that needle. I don't know.
I agree with your issue that you raised, Lisa, and Tanya, with your suggestion of how to address it. And yes, the explicit connections may not need to be in the science plan, but in the action agenda. Peter.
A slightly different topic, but first of all, I think Diane, you and Tanya did a really nice job in pulling together 10, I'm sure, quite disparate comments. So I thought it was a really good synthesis. Just a couple of suggestions on these early part of the report. I think it's important that we recognize, we might want to emphasize, this is the third iteration. And I think the planning process that was conducted was really, really well done, in a way that it wasn't just turning the handle and repeating what had been done before, but by raising the grand challenges, it was really seeing how the science is going to make a difference. And I think the process and the way it was done to be respectful of the science community at large's time was really well done. And that kept the engagement of a large number of scientists involved right throughout the process that is reflected in the report. And to do that in a time where most of the agency scientists were at full stretch with so many different big issues going on, I think was quite a remarkable achievement. And then also in these early sections, just two other things, very small comments. On page 3, we have your first full paragraph. There's something there talking about ensuring we have a well-trained workforce. And I think perhaps our intent there is not only a well-trained workforce, but also a representative workforce. So just a suggestion, it comes in much later in the report, but that may be worth adding. And then on page 4, I thought you captured, I'm sure, many people's comments about the importance of data availability and consolidating data. But I wouldn't want anyone to think that we were recommending the creation of an Uber database, which would be one way, because it's quite possible that it's going to be tools that link different data sources together to access that information. So you might just consider a extra half a sentence in there to clarify that point. And I think I submitted some written comments on that. But I thought overall you really did a very nice job. So,
well, thank you. And yeah, I see your comment on the data section. So we'll work on that. Thank you very much. Kathleen.
I just have one comment in the section in the paragraph that's at the top of the screen right now, which is that for the appropriate actions, instead of just focusing on levee vulnerability, I suggested we include something about subsidence in there and also about what we can expect about the future vulnerability of the levees as we go forward with, rising waters and climate change. And I also thought that it would be nice to have some discussion about the interconnection between the land and the ecosystem and the water, and how all of those work together to make a healthy delta. Whenever you have a healthy ecosystem, you maintain your land elevation through soil production and accretion, and that all works together. It would be nice to see something like that in the
See something in the plan itself, that we could recommend, and where that would fit under a particular grand challenge.
Yes.
Having that perspective.
Right.
And do you have a suggestion of maybe that's really in the response to the first question, is in terms of we highlight how the plan views the system as a socio-ecological system, but we could also suggest in that response to this question, is the plan bold, feasible, and forward-looking, that the social ecological vision be balanced by also an understanding of how the physical aspects of the delta are interconnected.
Exactly.
And so we could add a paragraph there that would then presage what we say in response to question B. Would that be a strategy for?
That would be an excellent strategy, I think.
Okay, well, I didn't write it down, but I think I can remember it.
Okay.
Tanya will remember it.
Being recorded, so
okay, but yeah, but that good. Well, I think we can do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anybody else that has their hand up?
I don't see anybody.
Well, again, I want to thank, obviously, Tanya, and we worked together pretty well over the holidays and various travels, and Edmund and others for helping to put the document together. Should we move on to discuss section-specific feedback at this point?
Yeah.
Inge, do you think that's what we should do next?
I don't know how detailed you want to dive into the specific sections, because
I wasn't going to review them, but if members of the board have comments that they'd like to bring forward, now we could bring them forward.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like a good plan.
Anyone want to bring them forward?
I have just one minor comment that actually I think is from the main part. I just, because I'm reacting somewhat to Obey's comment, so I didn't bring it up earlier. So, as an economist, I realize time is a scarce resource. And so every time we say, you should track this or you should have performance indicators for this, I think about how much will we gain by exerting that effort. And so I am a little dubious, to be honest, about this idea that they need to explicitly say exactly how they're tracking all ISB reviews, because that sounds onerous. And I think they've done a pretty decent job of citing reports when they referred to them. And of course, many of our comments are similar and overarching, and I think the more we repeat them, the more it starts to sink in, and it's all good. But I don't know if there's necessarily an exact one-to-one correspondence between everything we say and everything they did. And so I would vote for softening that language in terms of, making sure they cite our reports when they're citing something we said, but not necessarily spending a ton of time on that would be my preference.
Thanks, Lisa. And I know several, I guess 2 years ago now, there was a study to understand the extent to which our reports, the Delta Independent Science Board reports, were valued or constructive or used. And so we have made, as a board, more changed or advanced the way we engage the broad community as part of the planning process for the reports, which I think has been very effective. And now we see the reports being cited in this plan. So that connectivity has been improved or maintained. So Inge, are we ready to move on to public comments?
Hang on, I just had a quick comment. Unfortunately,
there's a few hands up, so maybe Diane can't see them.
I can't see. I have to scroll around. So there's
I think Peter and then Obey.
Okay, Peter and then Obey.
Actually, just one other very quick comment, and on page 9 under action 2.2, we mentioned FIRO, and I think that's a very good example, but the second part of the paragraph I don't think really adds to our comment at all. So if you're looking at you're reducing the length of what we're writing, I think we could get rid of a few sentences there. Because really the cutting edge technologies, including AI, is obviously going to be very important in the next perhaps few months and years for the life of this review. And actually, just as an aside on that, the reason for removing that is the National Academies has been doing a very nice series on AI and climate solutions. And in their last workshop, which was virtually, the keynote lecture on that, I thought was really relevant to what we're doing. And it was given by a guy called Davey Rolnick, who's a professor at McMaster. And when he was a student, he created this open community of computer scientists. And the important point that he made was everyone thinks of AI and chatbots. And he said that's not what we should be thinking about for most applications. So FIRO definitely fitted in within his he called it B-type applications of AI. So just for our work on climate, it's certainly perhaps worth looking at that series and what the National Academy is doing going forward. But my main point there was just to perhaps reduce half of that paragraph.
I see. Thank you very much. Obey?
Yeah, I just want to follow up quickly. I feel like the Climate Science Research Symposium highlighted some issues and topics and uncertainties. I haven't read in detail, but in Grand Challenges 1 and 2, I feel like maybe that needs to be highlighted, or what came out of that symposium could provide some topics that can be addressed in this plan. I think, I made a comment on that, and I think if you can add a sentence or two to have, them look at the report on the science symposium, when it comes out, and include that into the grand challenges, because there could be some research questions that are unanswered or have a lot of uncertainties that we need to address. So anyway, that's my comment.
Thank you. Do you have a specific grand challenge that you would recommend?
In my comment, I said it could be incorporated under grand challenges 1 and 2.
1 and 2, okay.
Yeah.
Inge?
Yeah, I only have a very small comment because I was sick the part of the week and only read through the letter, the comments once. I just noticed in that section where you just basically put in the comments of everybody to the appropriate place, that some of it could have been edited some more, kind of, or short, or something like that. But I didn't have a time to read through it after everybody commented, so not sure if this is still appropriate.
So that I understand, sort of editing the more detailed.
Just for typos, maybe, because you basically, the version I saw just had basically cut and pasted the comments from individual members into the appropriate place. And it seemed like, just little thing, typos, language, whatever, not much, not changing the the sentence too much, but
So
not
these
that one, no, the previous one, the previous section. But I could look at it. It's probably changed anyway. It's from the first time I read it.
We did do some light editing from the first time, Inga, but we can always do another round, so.
Yeah, and you may have taken care of whatever triggered this comment, so I'm not sure.
So these are editorial and minor suggestions that people had for the Delta Science Plan itself.
Yeah.
Yes, and right now they're attached to this document. It could be just a separate document. It doesn't, Edmund could, or Lisamarie could comment on this.
Yeah. Well, I was talking about the section before this, but
the section before? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but as I said, don't take my words with a grain of salt. May not
You were just
be.
suggesting, Inga, that we go through our written text and make sure it's more polished, just to check that out.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Not the feedback to the science plan on their editorial
No.
needs. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's just more for us to make sure we don't have any typos in our document.
Or somebody else could look at that. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, thank you. And Lisa.
Hi, I just had a couple more small comments. First of all, I do think that has been improved, Inga, since the version you saw. I just read the most recent version and it really is quite smooth. So it's probable that much of that has been adapted. So just a couple more comments, in addition to, the things I'll bring up in my written comments about, softening things that sound like policy. There were just a couple other things that caught my eye. Including something I wrote, just to know I'm giving equal time to me as other people. But under Grand Challenge 1, there was this question about, will the proposed actions solve the challenge? And I always get concerned about using the word solve. I think that's a really high bar, and I just think we shouldn't treat this group differently than we would treat our own research proposals. And so I think I think maybe I would soften that language as well. And then I had one more comment. Sorry, unfortunately I haven't put my comments inside the document. Sorry, there's one more. Oh, down under the Appendix A comments, there's a comment about camped and CSAMP that I didn't understand. So there's a CSAMP paragraph that makes perfect sense to me, but right above that, they're saying that there wasn't discussion of camped or CSAMP, and that we should learn from that initiative. But then the next paragraph says, Appendix A talks about camped and CSAMP. So I think we have something disconnected there, or it could be that I'm misunderstanding.
Can you tell me what page that's on?
Well, I may have a different version than you. I downloaded.
Oh yeah, I see.
Today.
Page 17. It's on the screen.
18 on the current one.
Page 17. Oh, so making sure these are coherent comments.
Yeah, I think if the second part is true, we might not need the first part. Because the second part is more specific and easier to understand. And
okay.
Yeah.
I'm checking for other raised hands. I don't see any. Thank you. So do we ask for public comments now?
Yeah, Diane, thank you for leading the discussion.
Hollis, you have your hand raised.
Oh, there you go.
I just raised it.
Okay.
I just wanted to say thank you so much to all of you guys for your really thorough and thoughtful review of the draft. I have read through all the comments and started incorporating this feedback, and I've shared the feedback on the resources and the appendices with the authors of those specific documents, and so that we can all start working together. But I thought maybe I would just share a few highlights from what I've been working on so far with this feedback. And I wanted to say thank you for including the action-specific feedback. I have been going through each action individually, and all this feedback has added considerable detail and context and examples and clarity to each of these actions. And so I really appreciate the inclusion of that, even down to like the commas that were missed. And so I think it takes a lot of time to get feedback like this, and so it's really valuable, and so I appreciate it. We also really appreciate the feedback about clarifying about the diversity of social science methods and disciplines, and you can't address them as a monolith. And so we've added a lot of detail throughout the actions, as well as a call out box to help clarify some of this in the main text. We've also are being mindful about the use of the terminology such as theme, and clarifying that while the grand challenges, themes, and area of emphasis are used to organize the Delta Science Plan, many of these actions are cross-cutting and intertwined across these organizational bins. And so we tried to make that a little bit clearer in several places. Yeah, and so we also really enjoyed the discussion about the science action agenda and how we can better create links between the science action agenda and the Delta Science Plan and the other Delta Science strategy initiatives. And so Rachel and I were sitting here talking about how we could do that better right before this started. And so that was a really good discussion. And I just wanted to let you guys know that the final 2026 Delta Science Plan is scheduled to be presented to the Council in May of 2026 for endorsement and released to the public in early summer. And so thank you again. This has been a great discussion, and I really appreciate all the feedback.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Hollis. That was that basically took care of my question to the Delta Science Program staff if they had any questions or comments, right? So, okay, Diane, thanks very much. Let's ask about public comments now. Are there any public comments?
Yes, we have a public comment from Deirdre Desjardins, but just as a reminder for folks online, if you do have a public comment, feel free to use the raise hand function in Zoom. And with that, Deirdre, you have the ability to unmute your microphone. Thank you.
So there was some information that the Department of Water Resources, the researchers who developed the stochastic weather generator found an increase in the frequency of the ridging atmospheric pattern. And it's an incredibly important quantification of uncertainty. They found that if they ran the weather generator with the probabilities of ridging that we've seen in recent years, that multi-year droughts, we got the same multi-year drought magnitudes as we would see with the reduction in precipitation of 12.5% and 3 degrees C of warming. So it's a huge increase in multi-year drought magnitudes. And I apologize for not catching it during the decision-making under deep uncertainty discussion. I'm going to be trying to get DWR a scientist published a paper with the Cornell University researchers on this dynamic scenario. And they say the data is available on the open data portal. It's not even available publicly. And it's just a huge issue. The ridging really could increase the severity of droughts and the number of consecutive dry days that we could see. So I'm gonna try to write a summary and get you the report, but I really wish that Andrew Schwartz had disclosed this when we were meeting and talking about it for the decision-making under deep uncertainty review, or I'm not sure if the Delta lead scientist understood that that was part of the modeling for the delivery capability report. DWR just chose to not use it for the 2023 delivery capability report, and instead assumed that the atmospheric circulation patterns were stationary for the period of 1948 to 2018 or whenever the cutoff was. So we know those patterns aren't stationary. There's been a very significant shift and an increase in ridging. It's just something that's been an issue in the science since 2009 when DWR's own modeling folks wrote, stationarity is dead, and, we need to consider that we'll see more severe or prolonged drought sequences than we've seen in the historic record.
All right, thank you very much for that input, Deidre. Well, I didn't hear much disconsent with the memo that Diane and Tanya put together. Thank you very much. So could we have a motion to approve the draft memo with suggested edits and submit it to the Delta Science Program after the meeting? Anybody? Kathleen?
I move we approve the draft memo with the suggested edits and submit the comments to the Delta Science Program after the meeting.
I second it.
Thank you, Obi. Okay, in that case, we'll take a vote. Start with Peter.
Aye.
Do you agree?
I agree, yes.
Kathleen?
I approve the motion.
Tanya?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Diane?
Aye.
Obi?
Aye.
Kenny?
Yes.
Thank you. Lisa?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. So we have.
Inge, you skipped me. You skipped me,
Did
but I
I?
vote aye as well.
Oh, I'm sorry, Anna. Go ahead.
No worries.
You say aye.
My video's off. I think that's throwing us off.
Sorry, missed you. All right, so that is approved. The motion is approved. Adopted, I should say. And so the next steps will be that Diane and Tanya will address the edits suggested today and submit the memo to the Delta Science Program after the meeting. Thank you all. That's great. So we are coming to the end of this meeting. Are there any public comments for matters that are not on the agenda?
I don't see any hands raised, but let's just give a few more seconds in case folks need some time to find that raise hand button.
Okay, thank you. In that case, I'll hand over to you, Edmund, for some preparation and information on upcoming meetings and items to follow up on.
Yeah, so just a brief overview of the March meeting. The ISB meeting will be a one-day meeting on March 19th. But before that meeting is the workshop of the Interagency Ecological Program from March 16th to 18th. This is going to be a hybrid workshop. All ISB members are encouraged to attend. There are a lot of interesting talks that are relevant to topics that the ISB are interested in, including contaminants. Jonathan Huang, our ISB Sea Grant State Fellow, will be presenting a lightning talk on the pesticides project that he is helping to lead to inform the contaminants review. In terms of topics for the March meeting, we're going to have a debrief of the IAP workshop. Jonathan, who would have concluded his fellowship by then, will still come back and share his reflections on what he learned. And we're also currently trying to target a draft summary for discussion from the Emerging Climate Symposium for this meeting. That's all we have for March. In terms of follow-up items from today, Kathleen made a motion to approve the draft memo suggested edits and submit comments to the science program after the meeting. The motion was seconded by Obe. All members voted to approve the motion. So after this meeting, Diane and Tanya will work on making edits and submit the comments once those are addressed. If you have additional written comments, please send those to staff as soon as possible. That's all I have for the follow-up item from today, unless there's any questions or things to add.
Thanks very much, Edmund. So all I can say is I look forward to seeing many of you in person next month, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.